The fighting has escalated as Israel continues its offensive across Gaza. Now, US President Joe Biden made a phone call to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu expressing concern for the hostages still held by Hamas militants. Biden said it is important to protect civilians in the fighting. He also spoke to King Abdullah of Jordan. Now, during talks with Netanyahu, Biden affirmed that Hamas's refusal to release women civilian hostages broke down the humanitarian pause. He said the US will continue its efforts to pursue every opportunity to free the hostages. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there was a gap between Israel's intent to protect civilians and the results on the ground in Gaza. He added that Washington is talking to Israel on a regular basis about protecting civilian lives.
We continue to recognize the extraordinary difficulty of this task, as Israel is dealing with a terrorist adversary that intentionally embeds itself with civilians. But again, Israel has an obligation to do everything possible to put a premium on protecting civilians and maximizing humanitarian assistance.
Earlier, US officials said they are not close to another ceasefire deal. On the other hand, a Hamas official said the chances of further hostage release were dwindling.
Either ours or those of pause, and nor do I have any news to break here today about the return of hostages, either ours or those of many other countries that are being held hostage. We're still trying to get as much information as we can about the hostages that are being held.
قولوا لعائلات المحتجزين من الصهاينة إن استمرار جيشكم في حربه العدوانية ضد أبناء شعبنا لن يعيد أبناءكم إليكم.
Israel's offensive has intensified in southern Gaza. The fiercest fight is unfolding in Khan Yunis, which is witnessing massive devastation. Now, Israeli strikes are hitting residential buildings, trapping dozens of people under the rubble.
The IDF continues close-quarter combat against Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip, including in Khan Yunis, eliminating tunnel shafts and the terrorists operating within them. Our commando forces are conducting raids in Khan Yunis and battling Hamas terrorists, with forces striking targets using precise real-time intelligence.
This comes ahead of an expected UN Security Council meeting on Friday. The UNSC is expected to discuss moves to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, after Chief Antonio Guterres repeated his call for a ceasefire. The Israeli army said they have arrested and are interrogating hundreds of suspects in terrorist activities. Soon after this announcement, a video showing scores of Palestinian men sitting in rows on a street in northern Gaza surfaced. The men appeared to be stripped, with their heads bowed as Israeli troops guarded them. Israeli media says these men include Hamas militants who have surrendered to Israeli forces. However, reports in Arab media say they also include journalists who were forced to strip and were searched before being taken to an unknown destination. Meanwhile, the Israeli army released another video from northern Gaza. The IDF says it was retrieved from the body cam of a Hamas fighter after combat in Gaza's Jabalia. The video purportedly showed armed Hamas fighters inside a civilian building. In another video released by Israeli military, Hamas militants can be seen firing anti-tank missiles from civilian areas in Gaza. Israel says the son of its former army chief, who is currently a minister in the country's war cabinet, has been killed in Gaza fighting. Israeli media says the 25-year-old was badly injured after a tunnel shaft exploded. He later died in the hospital. Earlier, a guided missile from Lebanon killed a 60-year-old farmer in northern Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said Lebanon can turn into Gaza if Hezbollah starts a war there.
כי אם חיזבאללה יבחר לפתוח במלחמה כוללת, אז הוא במו ידיו יהפוך את ביירות ואת דרום לבנון, לא רחוק מכאן, לעזה ולח'אן יונס.
Meanwhile, calls are growing to demand a war crime investigation for the journalists who have been killed in Israeli strikes in Lebanon. United States has said it is imperative that Israel's inquiry into the killing of a Reuters journalist in Lebanon comes to a conclusion.
I'm deeply sorry for this loss. And it is important and appropriate that it be fully and thoroughly investigated. My understanding is that Israel has initiated such an investigation, and it will be important to see that investigation come to a conclusion and to see the results of the investigation.
But the Israeli military has said that the incident took place in an active combat zone. The military statement said that at the time, Lebanese Hezbollah fighters had attacked from across the border, and Israeli forces opened fire to prevent a suspected armed infiltration.